Hey, I'm Kev Kermis, and welcome to Power Oversteer, and in today's episode we're reviewing the final round of the 2013 Indycar Series season, the MAVTV 500 Indycar World Championships, and it was held at the Auto Club Speedway in Fontana in California a couple of weeks ago in the middle of October, but I delayed it a bit. As I said, I wanted to look back at the race and see what really unfolded, because it was a chaotic race to follow at the time, and when I look back, it was much clearer to understand. It's actually quite a simple race in the end. It was just all the passing, all the traffic, the strategy was quite simple because of all the yellows that fortunately fell, but there were over 30 lead changes, almost half the field led the race. It was very exciting, and I do apologise for this being a couple of days late, and I would like to dedicate this episode to someone who I raced against on the TGP Series. You might have seen this on my channel ages ago when I put league races on this channel. Now I put it on my second channel, but yeah, TGP Series in season 1, it is a person I particularly battled with quite a lot, and he's always a nice guy whenever I talk to him about the league. I don't really talk to him that much apart from when we were in the league, but he was a good guy, and sadly James Campbell passed away this weekend, so I'd like to dedicate this episode of Power Oversteer to him, and all my thoughts and prayers go out to his friends, some of them from TGP of course, and his family as well. But yeah, very sad loss, especially at a young age. And so we go into this episode of the IndyCar Series finale, and it was a brilliant finale. Fontana never disappoints, it seems, and last year was very tantalising for the championship. This year, yes, less so, but it was perhaps a better race overall, much more entertaining, lots of overtaking, guys going 3 wide at restarts, even up to 5 wide at times, and you can run the middle, you could run the outside lane, you could even run the inside lane, so lots of different lines that you saw drivers try throughout the race, and the track surface really evolved over the race. You saw it was very dusty, and there was lots of debris during the race, causing lots of problems for drivers, particularly Honda drivers in particular, and it was just a brilliant race to watch and follow. So to talk about this race, of course, we always start with the race recap. So the race recap of the MAVTV 500, and let's start with qualifying. So the championship contenders, Helio Castroneves and Scott Dixon, they were quite low down the order in 12th and 17th, as they both had engine penalties. On pole was Will Power, so one of Castroneves' shotgun drivers, kind of rear gunners right up there at the front at the beginning. Alongside him was also AJ Allmendinger, the kind of wild card here in the Penske number 2 car, which will be driven by Juan Pablo Montoya next season. So Castroneves, that is rear gunners right up there. Unfortunately for Dixon, Alex Tagliani, who was placing the injured Dario Franchitti, was down in 21st in the number 10 target Chip Ganassi Racing Honda. But it was an interesting start as Power led from Sebastian Bourdais, really showing that Dragon Racing car could work on the ovals as well as the street courses. He and from AJ Allmendinger. Castroneves was moving his way up the order, and Simon Pageant unfortunately had to pit a bit early in his Smith Hamilton racing machine, and it was because they thought the tyre pressures were a bit too high, but it turned out to be a faulty gauge, and so yeah, it was a sad sight for Pageant to pit so early. But after that, the Honda cars were very slow at the start, and it was mostly Jai Hildebrand who was the leading Honda in the first 100 laps of the race, until the next 3/5 of the race, the rest of the race, where particularly the Ganassis came alive in that race. But then we also saw Bourdais take the lead with Ryan Hunter-Reay and Tony Kanaan right behind him on lap 12, and in this early part it was mostly Will Power, Sebastian Bourdais and Ryan Hunter-Reay up there. We also saw James Jakes lead on that 39 as the pit stop sequence got underway. But in this first 50 laps, it's very kind of quiet at the front, but it was always battling going on. But it would get a bit crazier as the race would go on. But we saw Ryan Hunter-Reay took Helio Cashineves in turn 4 after some battling as well. And then we saw Hunter-Reay take the lead from Bourdais on lap 32, and it was the first round of pit stops, as I said. And Dixon had a very close call for James Jakes on the pit exit. They pitted at the same time, and Jakes just came out in front of Dixon, even though they were kind of side by side on the pit exit, by Dixon let them pass. And then we saw Carlos Munoz, AJ Allman, and James Hinchcliffe. We saw them fight to the front, and Munoz replacing EJ Viso in strange circumstances for the season finale. It seems like Viso was having some money problems or was ill, and yeah, he threw every excuse out of the book of why he wasn't there. But Munoz doing a brilliant job in his place, a young Colombian who finished second, of course, in the Indy 500 this year. And then we had our first caution around lap 71, and Sebastian Saavedra in the other drunken racing car I'm not sure if he just caught a seam or something, or if his right rear tyre just went flat, but he spun around, and unfortunately Pippa Milne is right behind him, just had nowhere to go apart from the outside wall. Even with all the brakes locked in, unfortunately they were both out of the race. Our first two casualties of the race of the 25 cars that had started. But at this time we had Cashineves right up there, and Ryan Hunter-Reay was quite comfortably controlling the race right up there as well. But on the restart, as I said, Hunter-Reay was battling hard with Castroneves, and behind that we had Marco Andretti coming to town, on these big ovals that he normally does, and AJ Allmendinger as well. Will Power was slow on the restart, really holding up Scott Dixon, who was right behind him, and on the X tag he only go round the outside and making up a number of places on the restart. Brilliant restart from the now 40-year-old Canadian. It was his birthday on the Friday before, I think it was the Friday before the race weekend. We also saw Will Power try and move his way back through the order after that, so starting later in the stint. But it's really Carlos Munoz who was really getting the attraction in this second fifth of the race. He made a little touch with Scott Dixon on that, I think 83 it was, with the rear left fender, but or pod. It didn't really damage his car though, and the Hondas were starting to get into the groove. And up front we had Cashineves and Tony Kannon really battling from Ryan Hunter-Reay and Marco Andretti. But it would be Sebastian Bourdais who would take the lead on lap 90, and we saw Carlos Munoz really work the low side. The only guy at this stage who was really working the low side. But unfortunately in turns 1 and 2 he had a spin, and this was on lap 100, and so he spun round. Lucky he avoided everyone as he went to the outside retaining wall and came back down the track, and lucky he was fine as well. But it was an interesting period of the races, as after this caution we had a quick caution again on lap 111, and this is because of a spin for Justin Wilson. Got his right rear wheel caught on a seam in turns 1 and 2, and that turned his car around. Fortunately Tristan Volti came into his car sideways in the side pod, and unfortunately Justin Wilson did get a fractured pelvis, I believe, and minor backaches, and so yeah, he's got a long recovery ahead of him in the off season. Fortunately for him, it is a very long off season. I'm sure he'll be back in the car next season. Also caught up in the accident was Simone Di Silvestro, who spun trying to avoid the incident, but she didn't really damage her car, so she got going again later in the race. James Jakes, who got hit by debris, he got hit by, I think, an axle, to his car, and he went up into the wall with all the smoke. He couldn't really see where he was going as well, and that was from Oil Servia's car, who was going high, but so was Joseph Newgarden, and he kind of turned into him, so that unfortunately happened. And so yeah, that was 5 cars out on spot. I thought from Di Silvestro, who got going again at a few laps down. Also in this caution we saw quite an unusual incident. Will Power getting his visor changed. It was a very long caution, and so you could get his visor changed there, and he had it completely removed because he couldn't pull off the tail off, so they had to put a new one on. The Penske crew, and very quick and professional, as you would expect from the captain's team. And so after this, after it went green, we saw Alex Tagliani and Will Power fight for the lead as Scott Dixon passed Harry Cashinevers, and then Campbell challenged Cashinevers. So yeah, those Ganassi cars were really coming to the fore, and then Carpenter was coming on strong after really struggling those first 100 laps, just in the lower top 10. But you know, he was really hanging on to the car. But you know, adjustments, and as the track evolved, he got much better as the race went on. And so we saw a multitude of leaders in this fifth of the race, quite a stable fifth of the race from around that 150 to 200, that part of the race. It was quite stable, but you know, it was the leaders, it was always changing. We had Marco Andretti, Alex Tagliani, Will Power, Charlie Kimball, Sebastian Bourdais. We had loads of leaders during this point as the battle was fierce at the front and all the way through the field. And so we saw another caution come out around that 190. Sorry if I'm hesitating, I've got a couple of sources here where I'm trying to get information from, but yeah, that 190, Ed Carpenter was coming into the pits in turns 3 and 4. He was slowing down for the pit entrance. So was AJ Allmendinger, who was right behind him. Unfortunately, Allmendinger kind of got caught out and he had to swerve to the right, put on the brakes, and that just spun his car around in turns 3 and 4. And it's an unfortunate end as Allmendinger was having a great ride in his number 2 Penske. He was always in the top 10, and you looked like he was having some strong pace in that car as well, and really doing a fine job of helping Cashinevers get that championship. But that was an unfortunate end for Allmendinger, who's going to be back in NASCAR next season. And so we had our round of stops there, and then after that we had Alex Tagliani really aggressive on those restarts, doing the old Tony Kanaan bit of going around the outsides on them, and he was really challenging for the lead with Charlie Kimball, with Scott Dixon. But it was Will Power who was leading when unfortunately Tagliani was spun in turn 2, and it was quite unusual. He was kind of on the exit of the corner and he just spun around. He barely touched the walls, but it was enough to end his day. And unfortunately we already seen the first of the mechanical retirements as well, with Takuma Sato on that around 144, and then Graham Rahal on that 200. So you can see the mechanical side of all this debris being packed into the side pods. Teams have to really clear them out in pit stops, really starting to take effect in the race. And lots of teams are having mechanical issues, such as the Andretti boys, Marco Andretti and Ryan Hunter-Reay. They had to pit with engine problems, and they had to work to sort those out, Andretti, but they did, and they both came out again for the rest of the race a few laps down again as well. And so that was kind of the order, but with about 25 laps to go, we saw Kimball challenge Bourdais for the lead before this last caution that had come out. And Eric Cashinevers, he had a damaged front ring, unfortunately, and so we don't know how it happened, but he just damaged his front ring. It was like that angle, a bit like Tony Kanaan in Pocono when he was challenging Scott Dixon for the lead, and just a little touch on one of those rear pods kind of damaged his front ring and damaged his chance of getting a second off the Triple Crown that he would have got. Actually, he was very strong in that race. But yeah, this was the end for Harry Cashinevers. Had to pit under green flag conditions and go a lap down. This is after, in the previous caution around that 210, when everyone pitted, the captain called Harry Cashinevers in when the pits were closed. So Cashinevers had the drive-through, come back, nearly get back, and it was just these last 50 laps where it really unravelled for Harry Cashinevers and Penske, unfortunately. And not soon after Cashinevers had pitted, there was another caution out on that 230. Sebastian Bourdais running brilliantly in the Dragon Racing car. He was behind Will Power, and for some reason his car just turned right before turn 3 and he went into the wall, and so it seemed to be a mechanical issue with the car, and unfortunately that was the end of a brilliant run from Bourdais. He's going to be with KV Racing next season as their lead driver, replacing Tony Khan, so be interesting to see how he do better in a bit better machine or a bit better team around him. So yeah, unfortunate end for Bourdais' time at Dragon Racing. So after that we had our cautions, and then we went green again, but unfortunately Charlie Kimball, who was leading from JR Hildebrand, who was a lap down early on after getting a drive-through penalty on lap 127 for pit safety infraction. He had actually just overrun his pit and run over a wheel gun, and so if you run over a wheel gun or touch a person such as Scott Dixon did in Sonoma, of course, you do get a drive-through penalty, and that's fortunately what happened to J.R. Hildebrand, the only penalty this race, which is pretty surprising considering how close cars had got all race and there weren't many accidents going on. But yeah, unfortunately, Hildebrand's car had stopped on lap 237, and so had Kimball's. His engine just went as he was challenging for the lead. I know it was on worn tyres. Some guys were on fresher tyres, such as Will Power, blasted in to the lead, overtaking Kimball on the restart. And so, an unfortunate end for great runs from Kimball and his Ganassi. He really showed he can play with the big boys on the big ovals at this race. And J.R. Hildebrand, fighting for a drive next season. He really put himself in the shop window with a great drive in that Brian Herter Barracuda Racing car. But they were the last retirements, and in the end, we only had 9 cars running at the finish, because after these cars have been cleaned up, after some guys appeared, such as Dixon, to get his radiators clean, put some fresh tyres on, same for Castro Neves. It went green from 242 to 250, and in the end it was Will Power who had won the race. I would say his first proper win on an oval. He won that kind of lottery draw in Texas in race 2 in 2011, but he won on the big oval, and he really showed he was an oval driver this year with strong performances at Milwaukee as well, really challenging Castroneves there late in the race, and at Iowa, at any oval he was very strong at Indy 500, of course. And so Will Power, he said it was his most satisfying win, his best win in IndyCar in his career, one of his best wins in his career, I was thinking. So yeah, he's very defiant and very happy with that win after the race in his interview. And so yeah, great win for Will Power in his Penske, and he's won, I think that's 3 races out of the last 5, so coming on strong. And he finished 4th in the championship, would you believe, after such a miserable run at the beginning of the year. Really came on strong in the second half of the season, and again you've got to maybe look up for the Will Power name next season. Ahead of him, or behind him, was Ed Compter in the Ed Compter racing machine, who won there last season, but he's just one step away from repeating it. And he was ahead of Tony Kanaan. Denying Tony Kanaan, actually, funny enough, Fizzy Svoska were paying $250,000 if Tony Kanaan won this race for winning 2 parts of the Triple Crown. So he actually helped his sponsors out by denying Tony Kanaan, or partly denying Tony Kanaan, the win there. But great finish for Kanaan before he goes on to Ganassi next season. James Hinchcliffe in the GoDaddy Andretti Autosport Chevrolet, the last race for GoDaddy in IndyCar for the foreseeable future, as they have withdrawn their sponsorship from Hinchcliffe's car. But he's got a new sponsor for next season, Canada, and so he will be back in the grid in that 27 car. Then our champion Scott Dixon in 5th, and the last car on the lead lap. Only the top 5 finished on the lead lap. In 6th was Helio Castroneves, a lap down, and such a disappointing end to a great race from Castroneves. But that cool with the broken front ring with 25 to go really put the nail in the coffin for his championship hopes this season, but I'm sure he'll come back strong next season as well. Then Marco Andretti 2 laps down in 7th in his Andretti Autosport machine. Then Simona Di Silvestro, I said she was still running at the end, KV Racing Machine, well, she was 3 laps down in 8th. And then finally 8 laps down, Ryan Hunter-Reay with the number 1 for the final time in his DHL Andretti Autosport Chevrolet. And 8 of the finishers were Chevrolet. The only Honda finisher was the champion, Scott Dixon. And so yeah, 9 finishes out of 25. A really bizarre race for modern times anyway. You probably would have seen this about 15 years ago, but for times now where we have great reliability, it's very strange to see so few finishes. But it was a great race, great passing, great batting throughout. And so that is my race recap of the Fontana finale. Let's do the winners and losers now. So the winners and losers of the MAVTV 500 IndyCar World Championships. I think I said that right. And let's start let's actually go through the running order. I'm never sure how to do these with IndyCar with so many teams, but I think I'll go through the running order and then evaluate from there. So Will Power and the Penske team. Let's review their drivers. All did a brilliant job in the race. Will Power just came on strong in the laps with the newer tyres. After that penultimate caution pitting in, then really took advantage of those tyres, got into the lead and just held it for the last 13 laps. And it's a win that's not really unexpected from this season. He's been always strong in the ovals, at times stronger on the ovals than he was on the street and road courses. But it was a brilliant win from him, pardon about that, and yeah, we're going to look for more of that next season. As I said, very strong into the season, in the end 4th in the championship, under 80 points from the win, strangely enough. Helio Castroneves, 2nd in the championship, 6th in the race a lap down. Just all went wrong in the second half of that race. At halfway stage, he was leading the race. Dixon was down around 10th. He was still in the championship hunt. But then Ganassi came on stronger. His car really did kind of suffer on that long run there. And then of course he had the problems with coming into the pit lane when it was closed, with about 40 laps to go, and then about 15 laps later with that damaged front ring and having the pit under green. And then again almost coming into the pit lane under the caution when it was closed with about 10 laps to go. But 6th place, he gave it his all this race. You can't really fault his driving this race. You know, sometimes Castroneves has been accused of not really trying that hard through in some races this season, just hanging on for the points, basically, for the championship, and not really going for the win. You can't say he didn't try and do that this race. He really did drive a blinder, and it's a shame there can only be one winner of a championship. And you know, I think Castroneves deserves it equally as much as Dixon, but for different ways of how they approach the championship. Castroneves has been very thoughtful of this championship, or mindful of the points on offer. I know that did get in criticism. I think that was a very smart driving from Castroneves, and you know, it's very different from the Castroneves that older, who would always go for the win instead of thinking of the long term, go for the short term goal instead of the long term goal. But he changed that this year, changed his philosophy a bit, and it almost worked out for him. If it wasn't for that Houston weekend, then maybe we'll be talking about Helio Castroneves being a champion. But yeah, it was a great drive from Castroneves in the season finale in Fontana, just like AJ Allmendinger just rolled up midweek and rolled up in practice, and Penske had prepared a brilliant car for him, and he drove it brilliantly in the Izod Team Penske Chevrolet. And I've got to say, Allmendinger, it's going to be sad that he's not in IndyCar next season. I know he's getting replaced by Juan Pablo Montoya, but no one quite knows how he's going to perform in IndyCar with the long break from open wheel racing of 7 years or 8 years. But Allmendinger came in this season, you know, off the back of trying to rebuild his NASCAR career, and then he thought, you know, Penske thought he'd put him in a few races in IndyCar as well, see how he'd go. And he really showed he would belong in IndyCar if he chose this path. And you know, it's still such a big shame he went to NASCAR all those years ago with Red Bull, when he was really fighting hard in Champ Car. Really was a kind of breath of fresh air during the Bourdais years. And on this season and this race, you know, again he showed what we were missing in open wheel racing for the last few years. So no, I do hope he gets more opportunities in IndyCar in the future, but he really took advantage of another one here. Just unfortunate end to the race, you know, really getting caught up by a competitor slowing down, as they both wanted to pit on that lap. So, you know, kind of you can't really blame him for the mistake. You know, he just caught out, and they were both trying to do the same thing. But, you know, I'm sure he would learn from that in the future, and he would really do a great job. And, you know, starting second behind Power as well. Penske really had their cars locked in on this racetrack. Ed Carpenter Racing. What can you say about Ed? One of the best oval racers, maybe the best oval racer in the series, and again, showing his worth on the long tracks. You know, always a contender at the Indy 500, even if it hasn't worked out at Texas. at Pocono as well, and now here at Fontana. Won the season finale for the past 2 seasons, just couldn't quite get the three-peat, but what can you say about Ocon? The car wasn't quite there for the first part of the race, but it got better as the track evolved, as they dialed the car in, and he really fought hard with Kanan for that second place in the last 3 laps, and did a brilliant job holding off the KV Racing machine car. And so Tony Kanaan, 3rd place on the podium. He's been brilliant on the ovals. It was mainly in the road and street courses where the bad luck could happen. They didn't quite work out for KV this season, but yeah, Kanaan 3rd place, had a chance of winning Pocono, of course, won the Indy 500 finally, and I think everyone in the IndyCar community was happy to see that. But he's off to new challenges next year with Ganassi, and it's going to be very interesting to see how he does alongside Dixon, Franchitti and Kimball. It really does sound like a great team to go up against a Penske team with Power, Cashinevers and Montoya. It's going to be so interesting at the front. But yeah, great race from Kanaan, always up there during this race. One of the few people who didn't really shift up and down the order, you know, like Power did, Carpenter did, to the lower top 10s. He was always up there around the top 5. It was a really strong drive from Kanaan, and it's really going to be, he was really showing what KV, what they're going to be missing next season. But I think Bourdais showed also to KV what they're going to get. So, you know, I do wish Kanaan well at Ganassi, and you know, what a great send-off drive for KV. His teammate Simona Diesel Vestro in 8th. She had those problems early on. They're not 3 laps down. Finished in 8th. Got to the end of the race. You couldn't ask much more for that after those early problems in that big crash that Wilson had. And Volgier, Serbia, Newgarden and Jakes were involved. And so yeah, she was very quiet in the race. You can't really judge what she can do, being a few laps down from quite early in the race. But yeah, she did a very solid job, and you know, getting the top 10, which she deserves, and especially for her form in the second half of the season, when after they made these setup changes and then reverted back, and it worked out for her. And yeah, great job from Diesel Vestra, and I'll be enjoying see her on the grid next season, because I think there's definitely a win in her. If everything just falls into place, a win is in her definitely next season. So Andretti Autosport, GoDaddy, James Hinchcliffe in 4th place. Not a bad send off for GoDaddy, is it? And again, he was a guy a bit like Kanaan, he was always quite up there, and he never really dropped down too much, maybe in the middle part of the race. But he really came on strong after this first round of stops, and he just stayed up there. And you didn't really notice him, because there's always a guy around there who's gone a bit crazy, you know, like the Tagliani, like Munoz. He was really going crazy and making some moves, and he was just setting in there in the top 5, just being calm, or around the top 5. And it was a mature drive from Hinchcliffe, and you know, finishing 4th place, just behind Kanaan as well, just off the podium. Great ride from him, and he just needs consistency next season, and I'm sure he could be right up there in the championship. Same for Marco Andretti and Ryan Hunter-Reay in 9th. They were both very strong again. Can't really fault their performances, just having those engine problems with the car, you know, overheating, you know, the side pods being blocked. I'm not sure what Fontana can do to fix that next season, just, you know, clean the track endlessly the whole year before IndyCar arrives maybe. But yeah, it was brilliant drives from Hunter-Reay. He really showed the champion in years, and it kind of summed up his season, didn't it? He drove brilliantly, but something happened and he finished low down the order in 9th, when perhaps he could have been the winner of this race. And then the other driver, Carlos Munoz, the rookie, team from Venezuela, PDVSA, Ziggo, Andretti Autosport, Chevrolet, replacing EJ Visa at the last minute on the Friday, I think it was. Turned out at practice, as he said, he was dead last, but then they, you know, worked on the setup. He qualified in the top 10, and then he just gradually moved up in those first 100 laps and was battling for the lead. And then unfortunately that just running the low line, you know, it caught him out in the end. But what an exciting prospect. I really do hope Andretti sign him for next season. You know, it's a shame we didn't win the Indy Lights as well. You know, got beaten to that by Sage Curran as well. But Munoz, is he the second coming of Montoya? He certainly looks like it at the moment, and that would be interesting, sharing the grid for Montoya as well. You know, if Montoya had some of that old fire back, you know, it would be very fiery at the front. I get the feeling, but brilliant drive from Nunez on, you know, on very strange circumstances with EJ Visa not turning up. I still don't know what happened to EJ Visa, but it looks like, you know, he was ill. There were money problems. There was flight problems. I don't know. His dog, you know, ate his homework. Something happened. Dog ate his paperwork even. But yeah, great drive from Nunez in the other AG, in the, not AJ, Andretti Autosport machine. And then we got Ganassi, the champions, with Scott Dixon. And Dixon drove like he did in the second half of the season, all season really. Just professional, just quiet, just no one really notices. Makes some spectacular moves along the way, and he gave him a championship. And he can't really deny the championship, just like you can't really deny, you couldn't really have denied Cashineva's championship as well. He just drove brilliantly, took the race by the scruff of the neck after Ganassi had reined their cars in after about 100 laps, and really followed his teammate Tagliani through the field. And no, it's a shame that Tagliani didn't get to finish the race, but Dixon really showing his worth and really showing a championship drive, just like Hunter Ray last season to win the championship. Dixon did it this season. He wins every 5 years, so he's going to be a 4-time champion in 2018 probably, but I wouldn't bet against him getting it a bit sooner this time around. And he's only 33, got 33 wins in the IndyCar, 7th most of all time. And as the commentator said at the end of the race, he's maybe got even up to 10 years still in this business. It'd be crazy to think what could happen. You know, if he does the every 5 years thing, he'd be a 5-time champion, be up there among the all-time greats. He already is. But yeah, brilliant drive from Dixon and Tagliani, he stepped into from Kitty's breach, sorry about that, and just drove like Tagliani does. Really, he really was aggressive. He always drives like he's about to lose control sometimes, and this was one of these races where he was driving through the field and he's going 5 right on the outside. You thought, oh, this is not going to work, but he made it work. And it looked like it was going to be a race that finally paid off for him, where this hard charge and being very aggressive, he would actually make the finish for once. Unfortunately, it didn't happen this season. This season has been dreadful for him. You know, particularly, you know, losing his ride at Barracuda. But he's done much better in the sports cars than the Ferrari and Grand Am in the GT class. And then he did a brilliant job hit in the Chip Ganassi car. Is it enough to make it sure he gets maybe even an Indy 500 ride next season? I don't know. But he certainly put himself in the shop window. It's just a shame his run ended in very strange spin. He was already out the turn, really, in turn 2. And the car just went round. So, not sure if he just caught a scene, but yeah, such a shame for Tagliani's run to end like that. And Charlie Kimball, working his way up the field, being on an alternate strategy from quite early on in the race, making one less pit stop than everyone else. Grabbed the lead, led 3 times for 22 laps, and coming of age season for Kimball, coming of age race as well, bouncing with the big boys. Really could show you could battle with the big boys in the big ovals. So great ride from Kimball, and even finished in the top 10 in the end, in 10th, and he was in the top 10 in the championship in 9th. And so yeah, great drive from Kimball, and I expect to see more of that next season with him challenging on the big ovals and challenging on the road and street course, challenging everywhere. He really has come on leaps and bounds this season, and that drive just summed up his season, how much he has matured from the previous 2 seasons he's been in IndyCar to this season. And it's just unfortunate his engine blew, not due to debris, it just blew for no apparent reason. And so yeah, I've already talked about the top 10, so we're talking about the guys outside it. So Jai Hildebrand in the Barracuda Racing, Brian Herter Autosport Honda, and Hildebrand, what a drive from him as well. He was a lap down after taking that drive-through penalty, just overrunning his pits, but he got back onto the lead lap. Yeah, and I'm sure Hildebrand will be on teams' radars, even if Barracuda didn't look like they're going for Luca Firpi. You know, I'm sure Hildebrand has put himself in the shop window for something, at least Indy 500 run. So yeah, great run from the young American there, and you know, you just wonder why he didn't perhaps do that bit more at Panther. But yeah, great run from Hildebrand. Dragon Racing, Sebastian Bourdais in 12th, and it was a brilliant run from the Frenchman. You know, he's not renowned for his oval scores, even though he did win oval races such as Las Vegas and Champ Car. But you know, Bourdais, he's more known for his road and street courses, of course, skills, and you know, being in F1 and F3000 and Le Mans and Grand Am as well. But he showed he was handy on the ovals in this race, and Dragon Racing really got that car hooked in, and you know, he was always up there from the beginning to his end, unfortunately, and he had the race 4 times, the second most amount compared to Will Power that it 6 times for 35 laps. Only Ryan Hunter-Reay with 45 laps and Power with 103 laps led the race more. So you know, that car was brilliant for Bourdais. Just a shame about the ending. I don't know if that was a mechanical issue that sent him right, but yeah, brilliant run from Bourdais. And you know, as I said, Tony Khan showed what KV are going to miss next season. Bourdais showed what KV are going to get next season. So be interesting to see how he does in, you know, a bit of a better team than Dragon Racing at the moment. And his teammate Sebastian Stavager at the end of Team Sebastian, unfortunately, this race. But yeah, 24th was quite lowly down in the order. Only did 16 on laps for that contact with the wall, and that forced Pipperman into retirement as well. So yeah, it was the end of a strange season for Stavager. 21st in points, 236 points, compared to Bourdais, who finished 12th with 370 points. But Stavager perhaps needed to show more this season to justify his seat for next season. He had a couple of good runs, just didn't quite get it hooked together. But you know, I would still like to see him at Dragon Racing next season, just to see if he does improve. You know, he hasn't been in the best of teams in his IndyCar career, with Conquest in 2011 before dropping down to AFS in 2012 last season for Indy Lights, and you know, he got a win there and he was quite strong in the championship. So he stepped up again this season and didn't quite show enough perhaps to really justify a seat. But you know, he did have a couple odd runs where he did show you that he does have some talent in these IndyCars. So be interested to see what happens to Stavager next season. Then Smith Hamilton, and we have Simon Pagenaud 13th, and he did a brilliant job this race after going that down. As I said, Jan's thinking they had too high a pressure with the tyres, and it turned out to be a faulty gauge, and then he got back on the lead lap, worked his way back up into the top 10. You know, he was really fighting Ed Compter as well in most of his runs, but unfortunately, yeah, just coming out due to mechanical issues on that 217. And it's been a brilliant year for Pagenaud, 3rd in the championship for 508 points, somehow improving on 5th place in his rookie season last season. And so yeah, Pagenaud done a strong performance, you know, finished where he started in 13th, but he was much better than that today in his Honda powered Smith Hamilton machine. His teammate Tristan Volche just got caught up in that Justin Wilson accident on that lap 110, and highest place rookie, because he's the only rookie that's to complete the whole season. 20th in points, 266 points, and he started 23rd, finished 21st. He was running comfortably in the field until that accident happened. So can't really talk much about Volche, even though he did have about almost half the race completed. He was just working his way up, just running that midfield. Yeah, didn't really have time to show what he could have done, but yeah, an average run maybe compared to his teammate especially. But it is his rookie season. I'm sure he'll come back better next season. Then Rahal at Mananago, probably the most disappointing team this season, if we've got to be honest. And Graham Rahal started 22nd, finished 15th, and you know, before mechanical issues on that 200 forced him out. You know, his engine had kind of gone due to day, but he finished 18th points, 319 points. It was a race that was very slow to start with, didn't quite have the car there. They got improvements on the car, you could run it a bit faster, run it more through the corners, be a bit more confident on the power. He was getting up into that top 10, and yeah, then his engine went. But he was very anomalous, really, for most of this race. And you could say that about most of this season, unfortunately. So yeah, Graham Rahal, alright run, but it just kind of summed up his season of being an alright year, or a very bad year even. But yeah, we expect better from Rahal, really, and hopefully he'll be better next season. James Jakes qualified 5th. Brilliant run from him on the ovals, and his Acorn stair lifts, Rahal Letterman. And again, Honda. Unfortunately, he got caught up in that contact with Justin Wilson. He was even dropping back during the first part of the race there. And so yeah, it was perhaps not the run that Jakes wanted at that moment, but maybe they could have turned around the car, and you know, with the amount of finish they had at the end, he would have been in the top 10, no doubt. So yeah, Jakes, he's really been surprising this season. He has really shown improvement and really took the battle to Rahal in that team battle, and you know, they finished 18th and 19th in points. But yeah, they're probably both better than that overall, and so yeah, Jakes, encouraging year for him. Not the encouraging end of the season he perhaps wanted, but I'll be interested to see what he does next season if he does return. And now we come to Takuma Sato, AJ Foyt Racing. Mechanical issues on that 144 sent them out. Engine issues, the first of the guys who retire over engine issues, and 17th in points in the end, 322 points, just 3 points ahead of Graham Rahal. Such a disappointing season, summed up in such a disappointing race. Started in 25th, got to the edge of the top 10 before he had to retire, and so you know, it was encouraging runs from Sato, getting moving his way up the order. But yeah, once again, a retirement. He's retired in over half the races this season, 10 races out of the 19. Yeah, just disappointing for Sato this race and this championship, and you do have to wonder if he'll even be on the grid next season. You know, he's been in the IndyCar for quite a few years now, and he's shown he's got pace. He's shown he can really battle with the top guys if he's given the equipment, but he's also shown the tendency to make mistakes and just not finish races. He's as I said, that stat of not finishing over half the races is so disappointing for a team that led after Long Beach. So yeah, Sato's IndyCar future hanging on a wire, hanging on a knife edge. It will be interesting to see if he does come back. But you know, the race he drove quite well, and it's unfortunate that the mechanical issues took him out of it. And then Del Coyne Racing, dreadful race for them after a great season, especially with Justin Wilson 6th in the points in the end, 472 points, and Pipperman first car out. Couldn't really show what she could do, but she was quite low down the order, quite near the back with Savager before she got caught up in that run, quite disappointingly. And you know, the car wasn't quite there, it seemed, in the first stint. So yeah, maybe they really could have improved that and got up there a bit, like say Catherine Egg was last season in the Dragon Racing car. It wasn't quite up there in the early stints, and then got better as it went on. But yeah, Justin Wilson, disappointing end to what's been a brilliant season in his Del Coyne Racing Honda. On 110, just caught the seam with his right rear in turns 1 and 2, and that sent him round, and then Fortier hit him, and yeah, unfortunately he does have, you know, that fractured pelvis that will have to heal for a few weeks, and then he's got to build up his strength over the off season. But lucky the off season is quite long. You know, I think testing is really comes into fruition in, you know, January and February. So he's got, you know, a couple of months there. I'm sure he'll be back in the car in time, you know, be fit and healthy for that. But yeah, disappointing end to the race. You know, he's running in midfield just behind Graham Rahal, and the race wasn't quite turning out as Del Coyne wanted it. I think, you know, the pace wasn't quite there, and they didn't really start well in that 18th and 19th on the grid. So yeah, disappointing end to the season for Del Coyne, but it's been a great season for them. Panther Racing, Oil Serber 14th on the grid, and caught up in that incident with Justin Wilson. Just got sideswiped madly by Newgarden, and then his axle came off his car, I think, and you know, it went into James Jake's camera on the car behind. Very scary moment, and very scary for Serbia. So, you know, right, his front left wheel just come up onto the top of his nose, but the Tedders did a brilliant job holding that together. And in the end, 22nd in points, 233 points. Again, a guy on the edge of the driver market. You don't know where he's going to be, but he's always Mr. Consistent. He was working his way through the field, it seemed. You know, he's just running there in the midfield, and you know, the car was getting better, it seemed, from his point of view. So who knows what would have happened. He's always there, up there, all about in the top 10. And if you're looking for a guy to just slot into the car last minute, get you a result, or serve as your guy, he's kind of the Nick Heidfeld of IndyCar. And hopefully, not like Heidfeld, he won't be pushed out of IndyCar. I do enjoy seeing Sir be a race, and hopefully this isn't his last appearance in IndyCars. And it's like Ryan Briscoe will get that Panther seat next season. But I'm sure he'll be back. He's always around. He's always around Serbia, around in IndyCar. He always gets a ride or two a season. He's always changing teams. Always, you know, if there's one blight on his career, it's consistency with a team. Or he's always changing about, unfortunately. But you know, solid drive. Maybe we didn't really see what he could do, as you know, but solid season from him. Unfortunately, after that early demise of his Panther driving mobile team early in the season. Sarah Fisher Hartman racing with Joseph Newgarden again caught up in that instant, had nowhere to go, just trying to avoid Justin Wilson, and went up into Auto Serbia. But again, he's been a guy who's been running round these big ovals in that Sarah Fisher Hartman racing machine. Only really Indy 500 where he's been disappointing. And so yeah, maybe he could have come on strong in the last part of this race, then with all the adjustments. But 14th in points, 348 points. You know, it's been a solid season from Newgarden, and really has built on the promise he showed last season. Even if that promise last season did mean quite a few crashes and not very many results, but he got a few results here on the podium, of course. So next season, maybe even look for him to be up there and grab a win, challenging for victories in the Sarah Fisher Hartman racing machine. But yeah, not much to say about this race, unfortunately, this time around. And that is everyone. That is a long winners and losers. I do apologise for that. This has been a long episode, but yeah, very up and down fortunes, very down for especially the Honda drivers, and well done to Chevrolet for winning the Manufacturers Cup. Where, you know, Honda and whoever basically won the race got that crown, and it was Chevrolet with 8 finishes compared to Honda's 1. So yeah, well done to Chevrolet for that. But that is the winners and losers, let's do, of the race. So, of the race and driver of the race, and there are quite a few candidates this race. You got Will Power, of course, winning on a big oval. Ed Carpenter coming second. Tony Kanaan coming for any of the finishes, really. You could have said was driver of the race. I know Tony Kanaan third. James Hinchcliffe in fourth. Quite quiet throughout the race, but he's always up there in the top 10 or thereabouts. And Scott Dixon as well. Harry Neves. Marco Andretti had another strong run. Charlie Kimball and J.R. Hildebrand being right up there with about 10 laps to go, unfortunately, with the cars failing. Sebastian Bourdais very strong in the Dragon car. Simon Pagenaud, as I said, he was a lap down very early on, but he recovered that lap and he was running in the top 10 before he had issues with Alex Tagliani. Really showed himself on a one-off drive for Ganassi, and yeah, quite a few candidates, almost half the field. But I feel like I've got to share this between quite a few drivers, this Drive of the Race award. I think Will Power deserves it because he was just supreme in that Penske car. He finally got an oval win, and finally got an oval win this year. He was very strong at quite a few races, and so yeah, it was a very good run from Power. Got to give it to Dixon as well for getting in the top 5, being nowhere in the first 100 laps and coming on strong in that next 100 laps and being right up there for the last 50, despite having problems in the last 20 laps with the side pods, with debris in the side pods. You know, the engine overheating. Really had to take care of that. Well, as he said, he could have challenged for the win, and so you wouldn't really have doubted that with the pace that Ganassi showed in that race before the problems hit. And I got to give it to Hector Neves as well, the final drive of this race, because there's a strange drive from Neves for this season where he really was guns out. He showed it from the from the first start, from lap one, that he was going to drive to this title. He's going to try and all his might. We hadn't seen that a lot from Never this season, but we saw it in the finale, and it's just unfortunate his wing got damaged, and you know that the captain called him in when the pits was closed. He did that. He almost did that twice. He did that with about 10 laps to go as well when they went in that under that last caution. He tried to call him in, but Never, you know, saw that the pits were closed and just managed to get up back onto the track in time before entering the pit lane. And so, yeah, rare mistakes from the captain there. But yeah, those are my drivers of the race: Power, Dixon, and Castro Neves. Team of the race, and I've got to maybe give it to Penske. I think I could give it to Ganassi as well, because they had all their cars running up there, but Penske to give Will Power that car, especially to give Allmendinger that car as well to really challenge, and Allmendinger was running brilliantly during that race, always in the top 10 or thereabouts as well, like just like James Hinchcliffe. And you really, with the lack of time he had in that car, to be right up there, you know, brilliant drive from Allmendinger as well. And you know, it was a brilliant job from the team as well, just to set up the car, and all three cars could have won that race really. Neves, even though his car did drop off as things went on, and he never really got that adjusted throughout the race, he was still, you know, there were short runs at the end. He could have maybe been up there if he didn't have those problems in the last 50 laps before them. But yeah, got to give it to Penske for team of the race. They gave the drivers cars to win, and one of them did. And overtake of the race is always difficult to judge oval overtakes. I've got to say, I find it very hard with my road racing, street course racing background. I find series like BTCC and Formula 1, you know, mainly in my younger years, or F3, I'm not really used to the ovals and how to really judge an oval overtake. But I think I've got a few candidates. You got Hector, she never's on those restarts really charging through, and then you got later acts like Gianni on the outside, sometimes overtaking 5 cars on restarts. Brilliant driving from him. Carlos Munoz running that low line when no one dared in the first 100 laps. And I've got to give it to Scott Dixon. No, there was a great free ride pass for the lead late on that 217, I'm guessing, from the lap chart leaders here watching. They went free ride with Will Power in the middle and Charlie Kimball. As you know, it was Will Power on the outside, I think, and then Charlie Kimball in the middle, and he just went down the inside and took the lead for that lap. But I'm giving it to another free ride move he made earlier in the race around lap 140. Again, Will Power was trying to make a move on Sebastian Bourdais, just like he's trying to make a move on Kimball. But this was into turn 3s and 4, and Bourdais was in the higher line, Power was in the middle, and then Dixon just at the last moment into turn 3 went down the inside and took both of them on the exit of turn 4. So I've got to give it to Scott Dixon for that move. Brilliant drive, and especially as he's, you know, in the championship hunt. You know, it could have ended badly, but it was aggressive enough, safe enough to navigate that race and win the championship in the end. And that is my last Power Oversteer reviewing or previewing an IndyCar race this season. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching these. I know they're not popular as F1 Power Oversteers, but you know, IndyCar is probably my favourite series, or has been my favourite series this season, and it's been a joy to cover, and it's going to be a joy to cover next season as well, I'm sure. But I'll be back with season reviews of IndyCar, and I'm not really sure how to do it. I think I might do it on a team by team basis. I think that might be easier for me to do. So you see, the Sarto one will be probably 5 minutes, but Andretti Autosport one will probably be like 20 minutes long, covering each driver for 5 minutes. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking of doing. Let me know if that sounds good to you in the comments below. But just thank you for watching these all throughout the year, and thank you for watching them in the future as well. And so yeah, that is the last Power Oversteer for IndyCar this season, at least previewing and reviewing. And yeah, on that note, thanks for watching. So till next time, cheerio.